Welcome to part 4 of the Experience Cloud Consultant Preparation Series. If you've ever been confused by Experience Cloud sharing, visibility, or licensing, you are not alone. These are some of the most heavily tested and misunderstood topics on the certification exam. In this video, I'll break down everything you need to know, not just to pass the exam, but to apply these concepts confidently in real-world implementations. Let's jump straight into it. Alright, in part 3, we covered the biggest exam demand, administration setup and configuration. We looked at setting up partner channels, deploying and activating sites, managing users, building public sites, organizing topics, and integrating Service Cloud features. We also spent some time looking into Experience Cloud dashboards and insights, and also moderation features that are available as part of the Experience Cloud. Now, in part 4, we are moving into sharing, visibility, and user licensing. This is the second largest section of the certification, and it's where a lot of the people struggle as well. The good news is that once you understand the underlying concepts, everything else starts to make a lot more sense. So we'll break it down in a simple, practical way so you can understand not only how to answer these exam questions, but also how these concepts work in real implementations. As a quick note, my original plan was to include user creation, authentication, customization considerations, and platform limitations in this video. However, I've moved these topics into a separate episode to keep part 4 focused and at a reasonable length. With that said, let's get started. With Experience Cloud, it's not just about building Experience Cloud sites and portals. It's also about making sure the right users can access the right information at the right time, while maintaining security and scalability. In this section, we'll be covering 7 topics. User visibility. So this is about how external users can see and interact with other users within an experience. Object visibility. This is about how objects are exposed to different users. Declarative sharing options. This is around sharing tools and configurations that Salesforce provides without having to write code. External account relationship. This is about how partner organizations and external users can collaborate together across accounts. Topic 5, we have license types. This is around understanding customer community plus, partner community, and when to use each one. We'll also cover security models, how to design a secure Experience Cloud solution based on business requirements, and finally, roles for external users. This is about how roles work for partner and external users and how they impact record access. So as we go through each topic, I'll explain not only what Salesforce expects you to know for the exam, but also how these concepts are used in real-world project and implementation scenarios. In this section, we'll be going over user visibility in Experience Cloud. So if you ever have questions like, why can one community user see another? Why can't a partner user find someone in search? Or what's the difference between site user visibility and portal usability? This section will address all these questions for you. By the end, you'll understand exactly how Salesforce determines who can see whom in an Experience Cloud site. Let's jump in. All right, let's start with the big picture. So the first thing you need to remember is this. User visibility is not controlled by a single setting. Multiple settings work together to determine what an external user can see. So think of this like layers. At the bottom layer, we have org-wide default for the user object, and we have sharing rules on user object. Then on top of this, we have portal user visibility, site user visibility, and guest user visibility. And finally, we have view or user permission and personal information visibility settings. So for the exam, Salesforce often gives you a scenario and asks you which setting is causing the behavior. To help you answer these questions, you can ask yourself these questions in order. So when a user can't see another user in Experience Cloud, ask yourself first, is user org by default public or private? Are user sharing rules configured? Is portal user visibility enabled? Site user visibility enabled? Is guest user visibility enabled? Does the user have view all users? Or if there are certain fields that you cannot see, what's the personal information visibility setting in setup? All right, let's start with the most important setting, org by default for the user object. So the user object's default external access can be set to public read-only or private. If the user org by default is set to public read-only, this means that everyone can see each other regardless of other user sharing settings. If it's set to private, then Salesforce starts enforcing sharing rules and visibility settings. And this is where most of the exam questions live. So a common trick question is portal user visibility is disabled, but users are still able to see each other. This is where you'll need to investigate the org by default setting for the user object and check if there's any sharing rules. And if the default external org by default for the user object is set to public read-only, these site user visibility settings, these user visibility settings are pretty much ignored. So we talked about how when user org by default is set to private, you can open up visibility using user sharing rules. To set up user sharing rules, go to sharing settings, and you'll be able to find user sharing rules on the page. What you need to remember is that sharing rules can grant access, they cannot restrict access. All right, let's talk about user sharing settings. So user sharing settings will cover portal user visibility, site user visibility, and guest user visibility. All right, let's talk about portal user visibility first. So when this is enabled, users from the same customer or partner account can see each other. Let's say, imagine an account is called ABC Manufacturing. If portal user visibility is enabled, users associated with ABC Manufacturing can find and view each other. An easy way to remember this is portal user visibility is always about the same account and how the users belong to the same account can see each other. So to enable this setting, you can go to Setup Sharing Settings and enable portal user visibility. All right, let's talk about site user visibility. And this is where many people get confused. So site user visibility is different to portal user visibility. When this is enabled, users who belong to the same Experience Cloud site can see each other. An easy way to remember this is we talked about how portal user visibility is about users being able to see each other for the same account. Now for site user visibility, this is about the same site. So users on the same site can see each other. And this is Very important for you to know the differences. When it comes to configuration, you need to remember that this must be enabled at the global level first. So to enable the site user visibility on the global level, you need to go to Setup, Sharing Settings, Site User Visibility. So once you've enabled this globally, each site can individually turn it on or off. So to do this for your individual sites, so for example, I have a site here, and to enable this, you go to uh, Set up all site workspaces, Administration, Preferences, and check this box here, see other members of the site. Let's now talk about guest user visibility. So these are for users who are not logged in. And this is where the guest user visibility settings apply. So when this is enabled, guest users can see who else belongs to the site, including authenticated users. So in actual implementations, you need to be a bit careful when you enable this setting, as it can expose other users' information to guest users. For the exam, something very important to note is that remember guest user visibility is configured at the site level. So you'll need to go to Workspaces, Administration Preferences, and check Let Guest Users to see other members of the site. All right, let's talk about View All Users Permission. This is an easy one. The View All User Permission allows a user to see all users regardless of sharing settings. So you can think about this as an override. If a user has this permission, most of the visibility restrictions that we've talked about, they basically no longer matter. As far as the exam goes, Salesforce does not recommend adding this permission for guest users. So this permission can either be added to profiles or permission sets, and it's under the users section. All right, let's talk about personal information access. So user visibility is one thing. Access to personal information is another. So this is a bit like with user visibility, it's about record access, but with personal information access, this is about field access. So Salesforce provides this enhanced personal information management, and this is also known as EPIM. This can be enabled under Setup User Management Settings, Enhanced Personal Information Management. Once this is enabled, you cannot disable this. So when this is enabled, it basically prevents external users from viewing personal information in user records. It gives admins the ability to hide sensitive user information from external users. So things like phone numbers, email addresses, and other details. So the fields that admins can configure and conceal from external users can be configured through this personal info EPIM field set. And you can access this field set by going to the Object Manager User field sets and select personal info EPIM field set. So these user fields that should be concealed can be added or removed from the list. Things like last name, about me, mobile, etc. If someone needs access to these concealed information, you can grant this permission via profiles or permission set. This is called view concealed field data. This allows users with this permission to view field data such as sensitive or personal identifying information that's concealed from other users. I've included a couple of help articles. One is about control what users, Experience Cloud users can see. The other one is about manage personal information visibility for external users. All right, let's go into topic number 2. Given a scenario, set the correct object visibility in an experience. By the end of this topic, you'll understand a few key points. How Experience Cloud licenses impact object access, how guest user access works, how to expose objects using navigation menu, and some of the common exam traps. All right, so let's start with the license. So whenever you see an Experience Cloud access issue or question, always start with the user's license. One of the most important concept to remember is that a license determines the maximum capabilities available to a user. So think of it like this. You start with a license, and beneath license, you have profiles and permission sets, and then you have sharings, and finally record access. So if the license does not support a feature or object, there's no amount of permissions you can grant access to it. All right, let's start with the external apps license. So this license is usually designed for external users who need access to mostly custom objects from custom applications as opposed to traditional customer relationship sales processes. So you would typically assign these licenses to users who need access to business data, but they don't necessarily need CRM sales objects like leads or opportunities. So this license supports account contact relationships, contracts, orders, price books, product, assets, files, tasks, knowledge, and custom objects. Now moving on to customer community license. So this license is primarily designed for customer self-server scenarios. And this is when customers typically need to log cases, check case status, or view knowledge articles. It supports all the objects that external apps support, plus Service Cloud objects such as cases, entitlements, return orders, service appointment, work orders, and work order line items. Moving on, let's now cover Customer Community Plus. So this license builds on the Customer Community license with additional capabilities. So the key differentiators includes reports and dashboards. It supports all the objects that customer community license supports, plus reporting and dashboard capabilities. So if external users need broader data visibility and reporting functionality, Customer Community Plus is a better fit as opposed to Customer Community License. Moving on to Partner Community and Channel Account License. So these partner licenses, they they support more CRM focused use cases. So in addition to customer facing capabilities that we mentioned from Customer Community and Customer Community Plus, these partner licenses enable users to have access to Sales Cloud objects such as leads, opportunities, quotes, and campaigns. So these are the licenses that you'll commonly see in partner sales portal scenarios. And in terms of the object access, it can basically access everything that's included here plus the Sales Cloud objects. A quick exam tip. So when you've been asked about access to objects, Don't start thinking about profiles, permission sets, and sharing rules. Start by identifying what objects and capabilities does the user need, and are these objects and capabilities included in the correct licenses that's being assigned to the users. Let's now talk about object visibility for guest user profile. So a guest user is someone who can access a public experience cloud site without logging in. The key point to remember here is each site has its own guest user and associated guest user profile. So if you have 10 sites configured for your org, you'll have 10 guest profiles for each site. Guest profiles, just like any Salesforce profiles, it provides base level access, but the guest user profile is specifically for guest users. The only place that will allow you to access the guest profile configuration is to go to your all sites, builder, settings, general, guest user profile. When you click on this window will appear and you'll be able to configure access to objects here. You won't be able to find guest user profiles on the setup and profiles. You have to access via the sites. In short, if the guest user profile does not have permission, the visitor cannot access the resource. So when it comes to the exam, when you see phrases like public site, anomalous visitor, users not logged in, anyone on the internet, you should immediately think of guest user profile. Alright, let's now discuss navigation menu and object visibility. So a quick recap. Navigation menu helps users to navigate around Experience Cloud sites. It can expose pages, Salesforce objects, URLs, and custom navigation items directly on the site's interface like this. In the Experience Builder, to access the navigation menu, go to Page Structure, Theme Navigation menu, and click on Edit. In navigation menus, you can add new menu items, and under Type, you can select Salesforce object. So you choose an object such as account, case, opportunity, or custom object. And this is what makes the object visible within the site's navigation. So for example, I've selected account, and this is what appears over here. Now, one of the biggest exam traps is that adding an object to the navigation menu does not automatically grant access to its records. So for example, by adding the account object on the menu, it does not mean users will have access to the account records on the site. The users will still need to have the appropriate object level access, field level permissions, and record level access through things like profiles, permissions, sharing sets, sharing rules, and other sharing mechanisms before they can actually see these records. So a quick way to remember this is navigation controls discoverability. Permissions control access. In terms of resources, I've included a help article here for Experience Cloud user licenses. Alright, let's dive into topic number 3. Recommended declarative sharing options that could be leveraged for an experience. This is one of the most important topics in this exam. And also when it comes to implementation, generally declarative sharing is very important when it comes to debugging and designing a secure sharing model for your Salesforce applications. There are many declarative sharing mechanisms that are available in Salesforce. And in this topic, you'll be tested on the scenarios where you'll need to be using external OGWI default to meet your requirements to share records with your external users, external role hierarchy, sharing sets, sharing groups, sharing roles, team sharing, menu sharing, or using super user access. So we'll be going over all of these in detail. We've already covered license and profile permission set for external users from topic number 2, so we won't be covering here. Instead, we'll be covering from item 3 to 10. So by the end of this topic, you'll be able to understand what all of these sharing mechanisms do, which licenses supported, and how to quickly identify the correct sharing mechanism for a given scenario. Let's jump in. So before we talk about Experience Cloud sharing or sharing in general, we need to understand one golden rule. And that is sharing never grants object access. I'll repeat this again. Sharing never grants object access. So what does this mean? A user must first have access to the object, which comes from license that's being assigned to the user that determines what's available to the user, and also profiles and permission sets in terms of the object level access. So only after object access has been granted can Salesforce evaluate the record access for the user. So a simple formula to remember is that object access plus record access equals user access. So for example, if a user cannot see an object through profile permission set, or this object is not available for the license that's being assigned to the user, no sharing mechanisms can grant access to records from that object. As example, if a user in your Experience Cloud site does not have access to the case object, then no sharing rules, sharing set can magically grant access to case records for this user. All right, let's start with the foundation of all record access for external users, which is the external OGWI default. So external OGWI default defines the baseline record access for all external users, and common settings include private, public read-only, public read-write. This option might not be available for some standard objects. So when it comes to real project implementation or in the exam, always starts with the most restrictive access model, which is private. And if user needs additional access, open this up using sharing mechanisms rather than making everything public read-only or public read-write. Think of external OGWI default as your starting point in terms of sharing records for your external users, and everything else that we talk about here builds on top of this when it comes to record sharing. To configure external OGWI default, go to Setup, Sharing Settings, Organization-wide Default, click on Edit, and you'll be able to adjust the default external access for all the objects. Next, let's talk about external role hierarchy. So external role hierarchy allows external users in the higher hierarchy to automatically gain access to records owned by users below them. So in this example, on your Experience Cloud site, there are 3 roles: executive, manager, and user. Users with the executive role will automatically grant access to records that are owned by manager, users with manager role, and users with the user role. As covered in earlier sections, up to 3 roles can be set for customer roles and partner roles. The default is 1. One thing that's quite important with role hierarchies is that it's only available for role-based external licenses, and this includes Customer Community Plus, Partner Community, Channel Account, and Lightning Platform Plus. And this is a Salesforce internal license that's typically assigned to employees for the company that also allows access to external sites. It's not supported for high volume user licenses, as these licenses do not support roles such as customer community and external apps. And one thing to note is that the role hierarchies really only applies if the org-wide default is not already set to public read-write. If the org-wide default for the object is already set to public read-write, then everyone, doesn't matter where you are in the hierarchy, have access to those records, so they don't need to be granted via the hierarchy. A quick exam tip: whenever you see a requirement where a manager or executive needs visibility into subordinate records, think about external role hierarchy. Next, let's take a look at sharing sets. This is a very powerful sharing mechanism for experienced cloud users, and you'll most definitely be tested on how sharing set works. So, sharing set gives experienced cloud users access to records based on a matching field value. So, for example, user's account or contact. So it's based on a matching account or contact relationship. What Salesforce does is it compares information on user record, and this can be contact or account, for example, to information on the target record. So, for example, the user belongs to an account called company ABC. The case record is also belonging to this account company ABC. And since the account value matches on the user and the case record, Salesforce grants access. So the use case for this is very simple. If you have requirements where users should only see records associated with their own account or contact, then sharing set is your best option. So to configure sharing sets, you'll need to go to Setup, Digital Experiences, Settings, Sharing Set. You can create new ones. In this example, I've created a sharing set called Sharing Set Test. In here, you'll be able to select profiles that you want this sharing set to be applied to, and you can select objects that you want to do matching on, and also you can configure access based on the selected object. So over here, I have selected case, and for case, I'm looking for matching account on the user record to the account on case record. So let's say if both the user and the case all belong to company ABC, then we'll be granting the read-only access. Over here, I have the opportunity object selected, and I'm matching on the contact record. So if the user contact record is matching what's on the opportunity, then the user will be able to get read and write access. Sharing set is supported by these licenses: Customer Community, Customer Community Plus, Partner Community, Channel Account, and External Apps. Some considerations when creating sharing sets. The external org-wide default, when it's set to public read-write, you won't be able to create sharing set for that object. So for example, if the org-wide default for case is already set to public read-write, you won't be able to select it from here, as all the users will already be getting access to the case records. If the object has no account or contact relationship, again, it will not be available over here, as sharing rules relies on matching account or contact field between the user and the target record. You also cannot use sharing set when you have requirements where the sharing is based on hierarchy rather than the ownership or account relationships. So sharing set is only suitable when you have account relationships or contact relationships between the user record and the target record. Now let's talk about share groups. A lot of people get confused between when to use sharing sets and share groups. So remember this. Sharing sets grant access to external users. Sharing groups grant access from external users back to internal users or with other external users. So here is an example. Let's say a community user creates a case, and this case is owned by the community user. However, your internal team needs access to this case as well. And this is where share groups come in. Share group can share records that's owned by external users, and you can share these with internal users, which is the most common scenario. You can also share this with external users as well. So to configure this, you first need to activate it. To activate it, you need to go to Setup, Digital Experience Settings. You'll need to select a sharing set. And once you are in the sharing set, go to the share group settings and click Activate. And then you'll be able to see this screen here. In here, when you click on Edit, you'll be able to include group members. So these group members are the groups or users that you'll be sharing records to. And this can include customer portal users, partner users. So these are your external users. It can be shared with portal roles and subordinates, public groups roles and internal subordinates, territories as well. And you can also specify specific users. So you can share these records with both internal and external users. One very important thing about share groups is that it only supports high volume licenses only. It's not available for licenses that support roles. So it only supports users with external apps or customer community license. All right, let's clarify one of the most commonly tested Experience Cloud concepts. And it's also one of the most confusing one is sharing sets versus share group. So a sharing set and a sharing group, they work together, but they solve two different problems. Sharing set, this identifies a group of external users and determines which records those users can access. As we mentioned earlier, in the example above, I've just grabbed another screenshot here. In this sharing set, It applies to customer community plus login profile and also partner community login user profile. It shares case and opportunity objects, and the access roles have been configured so that users can access case related to their account, and users can access opportunities where their contact is referenced. So as a result, Jen, who has a customer community plus login profile, can access a record called case A, another record called opportunity B. Now let's look at share group. So a share group answers a different question. Who else should be able to access records owned by these community users or these profiles that's defined in the sharing set? So in our example earlier, again, I've just grabbed the screenshot down here for easy reference. This share group contains all partner users and all customer portal users. And Jen, who we mentioned earlier, owns 3 records. Case A, opportunity B, and he also owns this custom object record called project C. So notice something that's quite important here. Because the share group shares records based on record ownership, all members of the share group can actually access these 3 records. Now, notice something that's important here, very important. This project custom object is never in the selected object list in the sharing set. But why these group members still have access to it? And this is because share groups, they do not look at the list of objects defined in the sharing set. Instead, share group shares records based on who owns the records. So if Jen owns these records and the share group grants access to records owned by Jen's user group, which are customer community plus user, which is the license that Jen has, and also other users that are under the partner community user profile. Then members of the share group can access these records regardless of whether the object was included in the sharing set or not. And this is what has been noted here in the setup. Under share group, you see this text saying members of this share group, which are these group members, they can access any records owned by high volume portal users in the associated sharing set. And these users are what's defined in here, these profiles. The important bit is the second half. Note that members' access to the records is not restricted to the objects defined in the sharing set. So these objects that's defined here, that's not what gets shared. What gets shared are all the records that's owned by users in the selected profiles. So key takeaway, Sharing set determines which records community users can access. Share group determines who else can access records owned by those community users defined in the sharing set. Share group, unlike sharing set, it's not restricted to the objects defined in the sharing set. All right, next up, sharing rule. So sharing rules extend access beyond organization-wide default. There are two major types, ownership-based and criteria-based. With ownership-based, it shares records based on the record owner. Essentially, what this means is it shares records based on the user that owns the records. The other one is criteria based. So this is sharing records based on specific conditions. So for example, share all the case records where the priority equals high. With ownership based, so if you select based on record owner, in the drop down, you will have a few options available. You can share based on the manager subordinate groups. So these are the user plus their direct and indirect subcoordinates based on the user manager field. So this user manager field is what's on your manager field on your user record. The manager groups, so that's users, direct and indirect managers, again based on the user manager field. Portal roles, users in a specific experience cloud or portal role only, and you have portal roles and subordinates. So these are users in a specific portal role plus its subordinate portal roles. Public groups, so these are groups that's defined by the admins. It can be a group of users, roles, or other groups. Roles, these are users in a specific Salesforce role only. And you have roles and internal subordinates. So these are users in a specific role plus all the internal roles below it. And roles internal and portal subordinates. So these are users in a specific role plus internal and portal users below it. Territories, users assigned to a specific territory only. You have territories and subordinates. So these are users in a specific territory plus its subordinate territories. One important thing to know is knowing the difference between manager groups and roles. These are two similar things, but they are very different. So, for example, with manager group, these are giving access based on who manages whom. Role, these are based on the Salesforce roles that they are in. So more for the role hierarchies. So for example, if you think about the manager relationship, so the manager field on your user record. So Sarah is managed by John, John is managed by Mike. So these are your manager relationships. With role hierarchy, Sarah can be the sales director, John can be another sales director, and Mike is the sales rep. So you can see how manager relationship does not necessarily equal to the role hierarchy. So that's one very important distinction to know about when it comes to ownership-based sharing rule. As a quick example to help you understand this, imagine John is applying for a sick leave, and John reports to Sarah. So Sarah gets access to John's sick leave records. This is a good example where you will use manager group for this type of record sharing. You don't necessarily want to use roles because not, let's say John is a sales rep and above John's role, these are sales managers. You don't necessarily want to share John's sick leave request to everyone in the sales manager role, as these sales managers they don't manage John directly and they don't need to know about John's requests to apply for sick leave. So for reference, I've just included a screenshot here. So the manager field we are talking about is on the user, there's a manager field on the record, and this is what forms the manager groups. Right, so to configure sharing rules, go to setup and sharing settings, and sharing rules can be configured for the object that you want to configure for. For sharing rules, it supports role-based licenses such as Community Plus, Customer Community Plus, Partner Community, Channel Account, Lightning Platform Starter, and Lightning Platform Plus. It does not support high-volume user licenses such as Customer Community and external apps. All right, let's move on to Teams sharing. So Teams are collaboration-based sharing. Instead of granting access through role, uh, criteria, ownership, or based on matching account contact fields between user and target record, Teams sharing is about granting access by adding specific people onto the team. So there are three types of Teams sharing. You have account teams. So this is for if you want to have multiple users collaborating on the same account. Team members that are added to account teams, they'll get access to the account. So here is a screenshot of how you add account team members, and these can be done on the account record page, having a related list for account teams. In here, you can select your users, assign team roles, and also grant account access, case access, and opportunity access. Another type of teams sharing is opportunity teams. So you use this when multiple people need to work on an opportunity. So for example, you have multiple users, they need to participate in a sales opportunity. So the access here, different to the account team's access, this is only limited to opportunity. And teams members can have their own team's role on the opportunity. So you can have teams roles so everyone is clear about what they do on the team, select users, and grant opportunity access here. Another type of teams sharing is opportunity teams. So you use this when multiple people need to work on an opportunity. So for example, you have multiple users, they need to participate in a sales opportunity. So the access here, different to the account team's access, this is only limited to opportunity. And teams members can have their own team's role on the opportunity. So you can have teams roles so everyone is clear about what they do on the team, select users, and grant opportunity access here. The last type of teams sharing is case teams. So this is used when you have multiple users that need to work together to resolve a case. Different to opportunity teams and account teams where you can specify the team role separate to specifying the access for the objects. For case teams, you have to specify team's role and have associated case access associated with the team's role that you define. So the case access is tied to the case team roles. So to set up case team roles, you'll need to go to set up case team roles. And for example, here I've set up a case team role called case manager, and this grants read-only access, and a senior manager role, which grants read-write access. Once you have the case team role set up, you can go to any case and you can add members or add teams. And here I've just added a case member, and the case team member role is case manager, which grants you read-only case access. In terms of supported licenses, it supports licenses with roles, so customer community plus, partner community, channel account. For Lightning Platform licenses, it's limited to accounts and case teams. It cannot use opportunity team because access to opportunity object is not available for this Lightning Platform license, and it's not supported to high volume user licenses such as customer community and external apps. Now let's talk about menu sharing. So menu sharing is exactly what it sounds like. It's when a record owner or users with appropriate access, and this can be your system administrator, granting another user, role and subordinates, territory or public group access to a specific record. Menu sharing should only be used for exceptions. So for example, if a single opportunity record needs to be shared with one additional user, that's a perfect use case for menu sharing scenario. So in the exam, if you see keywords like one-off exception, then consider using menu sharing. One thing about menu sharing is that when the record owner changes, all the menu sharing are removed. Supported licenses, it supports usually licenses with roles, so customer community plus, partner community, channel account, Lightning Platform licenses. It does not support high volume user licenses, so customer community and external apps. To share records manually, find an object record, click on share in the drop down, and you'll be able to select these users, roles, etc., and grant associated access. Now let's get to another exam favorite, super user access. So there are two types. You have portal super user access and partner super user access. For portal super user access, you can also think of this as customer community plus super user. So this is available for customer community plus user to access to more records and data. And it's granted via an app permission called portal super user. This can be granted via profile or permission sets. So what this allows the assigned user to do is it allows the users to view, edit, transfer cases as well as manage contacts and run reports, but only for records that's associated with their own account. So for example, if this customer community plus user is under company ABC, then these access that I'm granting for cases, contacts, and run reports, you can only do that if these cases, contacts are associated with company ABC. So yeah, it does not grant access to all cases in the org, just those ones that's linked to the user account, and supports contacts and cases objects. Now let's take a look at the second type of super user access, the partner super user access. So partner super user access gain visibility into records owned by other partner users at the same role level or below them in the account hierarchy. You'll need to enable this first via setup, digital experience, setting, and partner super user access. Once this is enabled globally, you'll be able to go to contact records or personal account records and enable specific contact or personal accounts as super users. Supported objects, opportunities, custom objects, case, and leads. All right, let's summarize it by license. So, well, the best way to remember this is to divide the license types into three categories. You have high volume user licenses, and these are external apps, customer community. And you have role-based licenses for external users, and these are customer community plus, partner community, and channel account. And the third category is these Lightning platform licenses, which are meant to be assigned to employees who also need access to the external site. So in terms of the object access, everything will be done via profiles and permission sets, and the external org-wide default sharing setting establish baseline, and the permission sets and profiles and the org-wide default baseline applies to all license types. Now let's take a look at the high volume user licenses first. So they rely on sharing sets and share groups to share records. Advanced sharing capabilities such as sharing rules, teams, manual sharing, these external account relationships, and data sharing for based on account relationships and role hierarchy that are not available for these low volume users. Moving on to the second category, so these role-based licenses, it supports role hierarchies, they support sharing sets, and also all the advanced sharing capabilities. Share groups are not supported for these licenses with roles. It's only supporting the high volume user licenses. Now moving to the third category, and these are the Lightning platform licenses for employees. It supports most of the advanced sharing capabilities, but there are some limitations on Teams. It does not have access to opportunity objects, so opportunity team is not supported, but it supports account and case teams. It cannot use sharing sets, and it can't use share groups. And it does not also support external account relationship and account relationship data sharing rules. All right, a couple of considerations. We'll be going over guest user record access and delegated administration. When it comes to guest user access, the org-wide default is always set to private, and this cannot be changed. The object level and field level access is done via the guest user profile. And in terms of sharing rules, only read-only access can be granted. You cannot grant anything more than read-only. To create guest sharing rules, go to Setup, Sharing Settings, and pick an object that you want to create guest sharing rules for. In here, this is a guest sharing rule. Select the guest user access based on criteria. And this is how you can set up criteria-based sharing rules for your guest users. with these sharing rules, there's also an additional option which allows you to include records owned by high volume users. This option is not just limited to guest sharing rules, it applies to the internal sharing rules as well for ownership based and criteria based. So one thing to keep in mind is by default, the sharing rules does not include records owned by these high volume community users because they don't have roles usually. So that's the reason why these records owned by them are not typically shared unless this option is checked. When it comes to these groups and queues menu sharing, we'll need to remember that guest users cannot participate in any role hierarchy, any manual sharing groups and queues. When it comes to setting the default owner for records created by guest users, you can configure this via all site workspaces, administration, preferences, and you can set the default ownership here. All right, another consideration is around delegated administration. So this has been covered in part 3 of the video series for Experience Cloud on the administration setup and configuration topic number 4. Over here, I'll just go over this briefly. So delegated administration, it allows external users to manage other external users. Common actions that they can perform include things like creating users, edit external user records, activate, deactivate external users, generate new passwords, and manage permission sets for external users. The main purpose behind delegated administration functionality is to reduce the admin workload for organizations with very large partner communities. And it's available for Customer Community Plus, Partner Community, and Channel Account licenses. All right, let's wrap up this topic by going over some of the common scenarios that you'll likely come across during actual implementation or during the exam. So the requirement is customer community user needs access to records related to their account. You'll be using sharing set. Internal users need access to records owned by customer community users. This is where you'll be using share group to open up records that's owned by these high volume users. Records need to be shared based on record criteria. This is a perfect use case for criteria-based sharing rule. Users need access to the hierarchy. You'll be using the role hierarchy for this. Partner manager needs visibility across their partner accounts and user records. You'll be using partner super user. Public or guest users need access to specific records. Use guest sharing rules. Customer user needs role-based visibility and reporting capabilities. This is where you'll be using Customer Community Plus license. In terms of resources, I've included a few help articles here going over portal super users access and for partner and customer users, sharing sets, share groups, sharing rules, implicit sharing, user licenses, and guest sharing rules. All right, let's dive into topic number 4. Given a scenario, implement external account relationships for an experience. Let's start with the big picture. When external users need access to Salesforce data, there are 3 related external account sharing concepts we need to be able to distinguish. So option 1, we can use external role hierarchy. So this supports sharing within one partner or customer account. Option 2, external account hierarchy. This supports sharing between related parent and child accounts. And Option 3, account relationships. So this enables sharing between unrelated accounts. So let's examine each one of these in this order. All right, let's take a look into the first sharing option for external accounts, external role hierarchy. So we briefly covered this in topic 3 when we went over declarative sharing options. Now let's do a deeper dive on external role hierarchy. So an external role hierarchy controls vertical access inside a single partner or customer account. For example, imagine you have a partner account that has 3 external roles: partner executive, partner manager, and partner user. Users higher in the hierarchy can automatically gain access to records owned by users beneath them. So the executive here can see records owned by the manager and the user. The manager here can see records owned by the user. And the user does not automatically receive access to records owned by the manager or executive. So this behavior is very similar to Salesforce's internal role hierarchy, but these roles are associated with external accounts and external users. So the important thing to keep in mind in the exam is in the question, if you see phrases like users within the same partner or customer account, you need to start thinking about external role hierarchy. And this is often will be associated with exam questions like if the requirement gives you a partner manager, visibility into records owned by other partner users within the same account, then think about external role hierarchy. All right, so we've talked about external roles for the external partner or customer account. Now let's go over the internal org. In here, you can see these external roles are rolling up to this channel manager internal role. So a channel manager is typically an internal user that's responsible for managing partner or customer relationships. So these external account roles, the records owned by them normally roll up to the owner of the partner account. And that owner is typically the channel manager. So this channel manager is what connects the external structure to the internal role structure. One thing to keep in mind is records owned by channel managers will be shared with internal users via sharing mechanisms like role hierarchy and sharing rules. Let's take a look at the role levels and customizations that you can do with Salesforce. So Salesforce can create between 1 to 3 external role levels for customer roles and partner roles. If it's set to 1, you'll have users. If it's set to 2 levels, you'll have manager and user. If it's set to 3, you'll have executive, manager, and user roles available. These role naming convention, which you can find on the user record in the role field, Salesforce uses a standard naming pattern. So account name followed by partner or customer followed by the role level. So for example, for a partner account, you can have Acme partner executive, manager, and user. For a customer account, you can have United Oil customer executive, manager, and user. All right, let's talk about account role optimization. So we talked about how these external roles they can provide useful record access in terms of the hierarchy, but they can also create a scalability challenge. Before we talked about what it is, let's talk about this role explosion problem, which can occur when you don't have account role optimization enabled. So imagine an organization has thousands of partner accounts. If every partner account receives three account specific roles, the org can quickly generate a very large number of roles, even if many accounts have one external user. So what Salesforce does is that when the first partner community or customer community plus users created, Salesforce creates the account for external role hierarchy. So for example, if you have set the number of customer roles to three, when the first customer community plus users created for an account, it actually creates three roles for that specific account. A simple way to estimate the role consumption is to work out number of configured external role types multiplied by the number of active accounts. So for example, if number of available role type is 2, and there are three accounts that are active on your site, then the number of roles required will be 60. So at a larger scale, if you have a very large partner account base or customer account base, this can be contributing to something called role explosion. So there are limits that Salesforce has set per org, and this is for performance considerations. So the limit is 50,000 per org, not per community, and this can be increased to 100,000 per org by contacting Salesforce support. So to prevent going close to this limit or to prevent the role explosion, this is where account role optimization comes in. So on a high level, account role optimization reduces the number of external account roles that Salesforce needs to create, and this improves scalability and help avoid role explosion. So with account role optimization, for accounts with only one role-based external users, Salesforce assigns the user to a shared person account role. So this essentially means Salesforce delays creating the full account specific role hierarchy, and that reduces the number of external roles that needs to be created for the account. So for example, if an account has only one role-based user, Salesforce assigns this user to a shared person account role instead of creating the normal account role hierarchy. When the second user is added, Salesforce then creates the normal account role hierarchy, and that shared person account role is no longer used for their account. So this reduces the number of roles created for account with one external role-based user. So instead of creating 1 to 3 roles per user for account with single user, it creates one shared role per account, and that single user is assigned this shared role. So if the scenario mentions role limits, scalability, role explosion, or large partner communities with many single user accounts, think about account role optimization. All right, let's move on to the second type of external account sharing. This one is around external account hierarchies. So an external account hierarchy supports sharing between related external accounts using a parent-child structure. So I've got a couple of examples here. You have subsidiary share records with regional, which shares records with global headquarter. Another example here is you have the Acme Corporation, which has its regional branches like Acme America, Europe, and Asia. And within Asia, you have the subsidiary, which is the Acme India. So the main idea here is really upward visibility. An account that's higher in external role hierarchy can gain access to records associated with accounts below it. So let's say if this Acme Corporation needs visibility into records belong to these regional companies and its subsidiaries, an external account hierarchy would be the appropriate solution to achieve this. So the important distinction here between external account hierarchy and external role hierarchy is that these are not simply users in different roles within one account. These are separate account records connected through external account hierarchy. Alright, so to enable this feature, go to Setup Digital Experiences Settings, Enable External Account Hierarchy. As mentioned here, once enabled, you cannot disable it. Also, when you enable this feature, you'll be able to see a new standard object external account hierarchy becoming available in your object manager. So this object here is used to create the hierarchy nodes and connect these relevant accounts together. All right, so the typical setup process for external role hierarchy is step one, navigate to the external account hierarchy list view. Click on new. Step 2, create the root hierarchy node. So the root hierarchy node is essentially the account at the top of the hierarchy, typically the global headquarters. So if we take a look at this chart here, it will be Acme Corporation. In this example, I've selected this Corporation of America as the root node. So you can imagine this is as the global headquarter. A note here, the selected account must have at least one associated portal user, otherwise you'll get an error message. So here are some of the information that you'll need to populate when creating an external account hierarchy record. Give it a name, select the account. You can specify parent, but in this case, because we are top of the hierarchy, we can leave this blank. Make it active and specify the hierarchy type. Once you have set up the root node, you can start creating child hierarchy nodes and specify the parent field. And this is an external account hierarchy record that we just created here. Repeat this process for any additional levels in the business structure. And after all of that is done, go into the external account hierarchy record and review the hierarchy under the hierarchy tab. So confirm all the root, parent, child nodes reflect the actual organizational relationship. So there are up to 5 levels that can be created with a hierarchy. More can be added via Salesforce support. An important consideration is that this account sharing via external account hierarchy is only available for Customer Community Plus and Partner Community licenses. In the exam, if you see phrases like headquarter needs visibility into subsidiary records, then you can consider using external account hierarchy. So what if a manufacturer and distributor needs to share data, but none of their accounts are actually associated with each other? This is where the third sharing option for account for external users comes in, and this is account relationship. All right, so what is an account relationship? It allows data sharing between external accounts that are not in an account hierarchy. These are some of the examples. For example, if you need a vendor to be sharing information with a distributor, or if you need a distributor to be sharing information with a reseller, or if you need a reseller to work together with a customer and requiring some information to be shared to the customer from the reseller. These are all good use cases of using account relationship in Salesforce. So all of these companies have a business relationship, but they are not belonging to the same organization. They don't have the parent-child relationship that we talked about earlier in the external account hierarchies example. So coming back to Salesforce, a Salesforce specific example would be company A needs access to opportunities that belongs to company B. This is where you'll be using account relationship. Some of the benefits around using account relationship, it allows many-to-many sharing. So you can share data between one company to multiple companies. It supports lateral sharing, so you don't have to set up hierarchies, and hence you don't end up setting hierarchies that are not necessary, which avoids role explosion. It also supports granular access control, so you can set up rules to control what object you want to access at what access level. So to enable account relationship, go to Digital Experience, Settings, Enable Account Relationship. Once this is enabled, you cannot disable it. Once activated, there will be additional object that will become available in your object manager, which is account relationship, and this is used to define relationship between two accounts. In setup, you can also see account relationship data sharing role settings become available, and this allows you to configure data sharing role between external accounts. On the account page layout, you can add two additional related lists, account to and account from, which will cover shortly what these two related lists represent. There are two components of account relationship. Component one is the account relationship data sharing role. Component two is the account relationship itself. So I have prepared a requirement for you so that we can go through this scenario together. A manufacturer wants a distributor to see close won opportunities. So step one, we need to create account relationship data sharing rule. And step two, we need to create account relationship. So the result will be the distributor will be able to see matching opportunities from the manufacturer's close won opportunity records. All right, step one, setting up account relationship data sharing rules. So these account relationship data sharing rules define what records get shared and what access is granted. And this can be set up via setup account relationship data sharing rule settings. So going back to this example, we need to set up a sharing rule that will allow us to share all opportunity record that's been close won and will be granting read-only access. So once you're in this setup here, give it a name. In this case, I've given it manufacturer to distributor opportunity rule. Provide some descriptions and specify the account relationship type. For us, it's distributor. I'm only granting read-only access level as the distributor only needs to know the close won opportunities. They don't have to edit them. We are sharing opportunity records that with the stage close won. The account to criteria field supports accounts and users. In this case, we are dealing with companies, so we are going with account ID. So once we have defined what object is shared and which records qualify and what access level is granted, let's go to component 2, account relationship. So this defines the relationship between the two accounts. It identifies the account that is sharing the record and the account that's receiving access and the type of business relationship between them. These field names are a bit misleading. The account to is not the account that receive access. Instead, the account to is actually the account that is sharing the record. So in this case, the manufacturer. The account from is actually not the account that's sharing the record. Instead, it's the account that receive access. In our case, it's the distributor. There are a couple of places where you can create these account relationships. You can go to the account related lists, or you can go straight to the account relationship list view. In our scenario, we'll be sharing closed won opportunities from the manufacturer to distributor. So give it a descriptive name. I always like to start with the account to field because this is the account that's sharing the records. It's the account that owns the records. In this case, the account that owns these closed won opportunity records. The account from is the one that will get the access to the records from the account specified over here. The account relationship type. So this is the account relationship that we specified earlier in the account relationship data sharing rule settings. In here, the distributor relationship type has been specified. Easy way to remember this. To means shares data, from means receives access. So in our case, manufacturer would be under the account to field, which shares record with the distributor, and we need to put that on the account from field. All right, so how do the components work together? First, the account relationship. In our example, it connects the manufacturer and the distributor together. It tells Salesforce who participates in the sharing. Second, we have this distributor relationship type. This connects the account relationship with the data sharing role that we defined in setup. Third, the data sharing role defines the object. It defines the account association field, defines the qualifying criteria, and the access level. So it tells Salesforce what gets shared. So in one sentence, account relationship identifies who is connected. Account relationship data sharing role determines what data flows through that connection. So in summary, you want to use account relationship when accounts are not in the same hierarchy, but you need to share records with each other, and you need a way to control this account sharing. A few important considerations. First one here is sharing is based on account relationship, not record ownership. So records being shared, they don't necessarily have to be owned by a user from the sharing account. Instead, the records must be associated with the sharing account through the field selected in the data sharing role. So in this case, if we go up here, we have specified the account ID. So the records that we are sharing from the manufacturer's account must belong to the same account ID as the manufacturer's account ID. For example, an opportunity could be owned by an internal salesperson if that opportunity is associated with the manufacturer account through the appropriate account field, which we defined over here, the account ID on the opportunity record, then it's still qualified for sharing. So even though the internal salesperson does not work for the manufacturer's account, but because on the opportunity record there is a matching account ID on the opportunity record with the account ID of the manufacturer account, it qualifies for sharing. So something important to keep in mind, it's account-based association, not simply record ownership. Another important consideration to go through is one rule per object per account relationship type. So I've got a table here to help us understand about this important limitation, where you can only create one data sharing rule for each combination of the account relationship type and object type. So the the account relationship type data sharing rule that we created earlier has the distributor relationship type. Object stage is close one. If we were to create another sharing rule with the same relationship type, same object, but different criteria, this won't be allowed. Instead, we have to update the initial data sharing rule if we want to include this into the criteria as well. If we have this relationship type where the relationship type is distributor, object is again opportunity, the same criteria, but the access level instead of read only, we go with read write. Again, this is not allowed because it does not allow for the same relationship type and object combination. If we go with same relationship type, which is distributor but new object, is this allowed? Yes, because it's a unique combination. If we go with same object, new relationship, is this allowed? Yes, because this vendor relationship type does not exist yet, and this opportunity object exists. But when we look at the overall combination, this is a unique combination, so we can create this. And that's the same case here as well. Same relationship type distributor, but using a custom object. An important thing to consider is the receiving users must have a supported role-based external licenses such as partner community or customer community plus. Note that for these users to be able to see these records, they still need to have the appropriate user licenses, object permissions, field security, etc. So account relationship type supports a few standard objects and custom objects. I've listed the key ones here. There are a few more that you can find out in the help articles, which I'll supply below. So this includes accounts, context, campaigns, cases, leads, opportunities, orders, and supports custom objects. A super important design consideration when account role optimization or personal accounts are enabled, you won't be able to use account relationship data sharing rule. Salesforce suggests that to use other sharing methods to open up access to records such as sharing sets and groups. All right, let's bring everything together. So in this topic, we have discussed three external account sharing options: partner customer role hierarchy, external account hierarchy, and account relationship. So the role hierarchy is pretty much vertical and it's applied to a single account only. Best use case is for executives and managers accessing records owned by users beneath them. External account hierarchy, again, this is hierarchy is required and it's more of a parent-child sharing. The scope for this is multiple related accounts within a big organization, very suitable for corporate hierarchy. So related accounts in some sort of organization tree for different child companies. Account relationship, this is The lateral one does not require hierarchy access, and the scope for this is for unrelated accounts. Best use case is for business partnership where you have to share data between unrelated companies like vendor, distributor, reseller, and customer. I've included three help articles here. First one is around configuring external account hierarchy. Second one around account relationships and account relationship data sharing rules. Third one here is around sharing considerations for using account role optimization. All right, let's dive into topic number 5. Given a set of requirements, evaluate which external license types to use. So important considerations when choosing Salesforce licenses are we need to know who the user is, what data they need, how we'll be sharing the data, which platform features they require, how frequently they will be logging into the site, and whether they are an internal employee, a customer, or a partner. So in this topic, we'll build a complete licensing picture and compare major external license types using practical scenarios that I have prepared for you. By the end of this topic, you should be able to evaluate a set of requirements and also identify the most appropriate license. Before we look at external license types, let's take a step back and understand a very important principle, which is a user's effective functionality is determined by multiple layers. At the top, the Salesforce edition in your org and the products that's purchased determine what's available in your org. In the middle, you have users license, feature license, and permission set licenses. So these sets the maximum baseline of functionality that can potentially be assigned to the user. And at the bottom, you have profiles, permission sets, and record level access. And these controls what that particular user can potentially do and see. All right, let's start from the top. Salesforce edition. So this is the first layer. The edition applies to the Salesforce org as a whole, and there are multiple editions available, such as Professional, Enterprise, Unlimited, Performance, and Developer. And the edition determines the general platform capabilities and also limits available in the organization. So, for example, these editions all have different limits on the number of custom objects that you allow in the org. All right, let's go over the second layer, which is products and organization capabilities. So, a product license can activate Salesforce product or product family for the organization. It can provide additional functionalities to supplement the org's Salesforce edition. Couple of examples: Sales Cloud product license and Service Cloud product license. One thing that's important to understand is that the presence of these licenses in your org does not automatically mean that every user can access every part of these products. So you can think of installing a room inside a facility. The room exists, but each person still needs the correct type of keys and permissions to enter this room. And this is very important, especially when it comes to Experience Cloud. So your organization might use opportunities internally, but external users still requires an external license that supports opportunity access to be able to access this object. All right, let's now take a look at the third layer, user license. So every Salesforce user when created needs to be assigned a user license. And this is what establishes the maximum baseline functionality that can be granted to that user. One super important thing to keep in mind around user license is that a license makes functionality eligible, but it does not necessarily grant that functionality. The actual permissions are still controlled by the user's profiles and permission sets and the permission set licenses, feature licenses that you assign to the users. Here are some of the example user licenses that you'll be able to find on the setup company information, such as Salesforce, Salesforce platform, customer community login, and identity. All right, so before selecting an Experience Cloud license, we need to determine whether the person is genuinely external. So if the user is an employee, a contractor, or another person acting as part of your internal workforce or your company, an internal Salesforce license is generally the appropriate starting point, even if that user needs to access Experience Cloud site. You'll be able to assign this Lightning Platform user license that allows internal users to be able to access Experience Cloud sites. If the person, however, is a customer, supplier, distributor, reseller, dealer, or other external stakeholders that are not acting on behalf or as part of your company, then an external license will be appropriate. And this is quite important because an external license should not be selected just because it appears to be cheaper, because Salesforce does provide specific guidelines on deciding whether internal or external licenses should be used. Going back to the Lightning Platform user license, there are two subtypes. You have the starter version and the plus license version. If the user needs access up to 10 custom objects, then the starter license will be appropriate. And if you require up to 110 custom objects, then Lightning Platform Plus is the one to go. Once you have identified your user requires external user license, you also need to decide which license types to assign or to purchase. So a member-based license is purchased for a specific user, and it's normally better suited for people who need to access the site frequently. The login-based licenses uses a pool of login capacity, so it can be more appropriate when you have a larger external population, but each user only logs in occasionally. So, for example, a few times a month or less. All right, let's now go over the 5 mostly used external user licenses: Customer Community, Customer Community Plus, Partner Community, Channel Account, and External Apps. Let's start with Customer Community License. So this is a good starting point for high volume customer facing self-service scenarios, typically business to customer use cases. So if the user needs access to case knowledge articles, self-service, checking account information, working with other customers, then this is a good starting point for these cohorts. The important limitation for customer community is that it's not intended for the partner sales process. Things like campaigns, opportunity, and leads, these business to business objects, it's not supported in this license. Another limitation with this is a high volume. It uses a high volume sharing model, so it does not support roles. So some of the advanced sharing capability, like sharing roles, is not supported in this license type. All right, next one we have Customer Community Plus. So this license supports customer service experiences that require greater data access and sharing control. So it's suitable when users need to have access to reports, dashboards, advanced sharing roles, and delegated administration. However, this is still customer focused, so does not become a partner sales license just because it supports reports and dashboards and also roles. It still doesn't have access to campaigns, opportunities, and leads. Same limitations as the customer community license. One thing that's different about Customer Community Plus is that these users will have roles, and role-based external licenses that offer advanced sharing, but also increases role hierarchy complexities and will require additional design considerations. And we talked about account role optimization in the previous topic, so there is something to consider when using Customer Community Plus licenses. Now let's talk about Partner Community licenses. So the Partner Community license supports leads, opportunities, and campaigns, and it basically contains all the capabilities that Customer Community Plus licenses have. This license is intended for business to business partner relationship management. And as mentioned, it contains all the capabilities that Customer Community Plus licenses offer, such as reports, dashboards, advanced sharing roles, and delegated administration. Next, let's take a look at Channel Account. So it has the same features as Partner Community License, but the price is a bit different. The pricing model. With Channel Account, it's based on number of partners instead of number of individual users. And this is useful when you know the number of partners that want to access your site, but not sure about how many users you need access in total. Next, we have external apps. So this is a perfect license if your site is highly customized and it requires access to many custom objects, external data, API integrations, etc. It does not have access to a lot of the standard objects like case, campaigns, opportunities, and leads. The limit is 100 custom objects. All of these 5 licenses support both member-based and also login-based. All right, let's move on to the next layer, feature licenses and permission set licenses. So after selecting the user license, additional capabilities for the user is dependent on the assigned feature licenses and permission set licenses. So a permission set license makes an additional collection of product capabilities available to an eligible user. Examples include Omni Studio permission set license or Action Plan permission set license. And these are some of the permission set license examples. When you go to permission sets, you can often see permission set licenses attached to permission sets. Some of the permission sets will have associated licenses. Some of the permission sets do not. A very important concept to understand. A permission set license does not necessarily grant users all those permissions immediately. What the permission set license does is it expands what can be granted to the user, but it is the permission set that assigns the required permissions. So, for example, a user has been assigned the MDF for channel manager's permission set, and this comes with the Salesforce license. Having the Salesforce license assigned does not mean you'll get access to all the objects that comes with the Salesforce license. You still need to assign those object access via the permission set itself. All right, let's talk about feature license. So this is what unlocks a specific Salesforce feature to a user. Very common ones are knowledge user, allows you to to use knowledge articles, service cloud user, and marketing user. And these are some of the feature licenses that you can find under company information. Another very important concept to get very familiar. So neither your permission set license or feature license can override the fundamental boundaries of the best user license. So the best user license is another layer above the feature license and permission set license. So your selected external license must already be compatible with the capability you want to provide through your feature license or permission set license. So for example, there is an Omi Studio permission set license, and this cannot be assigned to external users. You'll get an error when you try to assign Omi Studio permission set license because this is meant to be for internal users who need to use Omi Studio. For external users, they need to be assigned the Omi Studio runtime for community's permission set license instead. All right, let's move on to the next layer, profiles and permission set licenses. So the user licenses that we talked about earlier, also the feature license and permission set licenses, these determine the maximum available capability. The profiles and permission sets, these determine which of those available capabilities are actually assigned. So profiles and permission sets can control object, field permissions, user permissions, access to apps, tabs, and system capabilities. So as example, let's say we have two users and both have the partner community licenses, but they receive different functional access because they have different profiles and permission sets. One partner community user might be managing leads and opportunities, while the other one only view knowledge, articles, and selected account data. All right, the last layer is record level access. So having access to an object is not the same as record visibility. A user can have read access to the case object, but still only see cases that's been shared with their user. And there are many record visibility control mechanisms that are available, which we have covered in previous topics, such as awkward defaults, sharing sets, sharing roles, external roles, role hierarchies, account relationship, manual sharing, or programmatic sharing. The available sharing model, as mentioned earlier, also depends on the license type. So high volume licenses such as customer community are designed for scale and typically rely on mechanisms such as sharing sets. Role-based licenses such as Customer Community Plus and Partner Community support roles and more advanced sharing mechanisms such as sharing rules. And this is why never choose a license only based on object access. You almost also you, you also need to ask how will these external users gain access to the correct records. All right, let's go over a quick license selection framework for experienced cloud users. So let's start with whether your site requires public access or authenticated user experience. If it's just public access, everyone can access information without logging in, then you don't need a Salesforce license. For guests and unauthenticated users, you can just go with the guest user profile and grant object or field level permissions there. If you require authenticated access, however, you need to ask yourself another question. Is this an employee experience or external user experience? If it's employee experience, ask yourself the question, does the user need more than 10 custom objects? If yes, you need to use Lightning Platform Plus, which supports up to 110 custom objects. Otherwise, go with Lightning Platform Starter. If your experience site is for external users, then you need to determine whether they need access to business objects such as campaigns, opportunities, and leads. If yes, do you require license per partner account or per user? If you require access based on per partner account, then go with channel account. Otherwise, go with partner community license. If you don't require access to these sales objects, then do you need access up to 100 custom objects? If yes, go with external apps license. Otherwise, you need to ask yourself whether the user needs access to reports, dashboards, advanced sharing, delegated administration, or roles. If any of these is yes, go with Customer Community Plus license. Otherwise, you can stick with the Customer Community license. All right, I've prepared a summary table here to go over Experience Cloud license feature access. For base objects, such as accounts, assets, contacts, etc., it's available for all 5 external license types. For Sales Cloud objects such as leads, campaigns, opportunities, and quotes, it's only available for partner licenses like partner community and channel accounts. I've put a star next to opportunities, and that is because recently Salesforce had made changes to Customer Community Plus license, and now it can access opportunity object. So one very important thing is make sure to check your Experience Cloud exam guide and the release that you are being tested on. This has been introduced recently, so if the release is still in the past, you still need to consider that the Customer Community Plus has no access to opportunities. For Service Cloud objects, case, entitlements, etc., it's available for all of these 4 licenses apart from external apps. And the main reason for external apps not having access to both Sales Cloud and Service Cloud objects is because it's designed to access custom objects. It has access to external objects across the board, and in terms of custom objects, it's 10 for custom community, 10 for customer community plus, 10 for channel accounts, and 10 for partner accounts. It can be increased to 100 depending on your license agreements and which license type or which SKU you have purchased for your partner community account. For external apps, it's up to 100 objects. Knowledge, it's accessible across the board. For territory management, it's only available for partner and channel accounts, as this is more for to manage your sales organization. For reports and dashboards, you need customer community plus, partner community, or channel accounts. For Lightning Platform user licenses, I've done a comparison between the starter and the plus. So these two licenses have access to Service Cloud objects, but not Sales Cloud objects. Access to nodes, attachments, external objects. In terms of custom objects, it's 10 for starter, 110 for plus. Read only for knowledge, no access to territory management, and access to chatter. For resources, I have included articles around user licenses, channel account licenses, Lightning Platform licenses, feature licenses, and permission set licenses. All right, let's dive into topic number 6. Given a scenario, determine a security model based on an experienced use case. So this topic brings together everything that we have covered so far from topic 1 to 5, such as licensing, object permissions, record access, external user roles, sharing sets and share groups, external account hierarchy, account relationship sharing, and super user access. The focus on this topic is really to be able to analyze a business scenario and determine the best security mechanism to meet the requirements. So to help with selecting the most appropriate security mechanism, I've put together a decision process. So these are the 5 questions that you should ask yourself when you are analyzing an experienced cloud security scenario. Before analyzing the security scenarios, the most important thing is to analyze and identify the external users' licenses. This is because the licenses determine a few things. The objects that users can access, whether the user can have a role, and whether role-based sharing is available, and which external sharing features can be used. Next, ask yourself, what does the user need to do with the object? Remember that profiles and permissions determine what users can do with an object, such as create, read, edit, and delete. One thing that's quite important is that object permission and record access, they are two different things. Object permission is about, can the user access this type of object? Record access is about what individual records can the user access. For a user to be able to work with a record, they need to have both the object permission and record access to the record that the user is working with. Profiles and permission sets also control the field level access as well, right? Whether users can edit or read a field. Next, what is the default level of record access? And the baseline access is determined by organization-wide defaults, OWD. So the best practice is to always start with the most restrictive access, which is private, and grant additional access using appropriate sharing mechanisms. So always follow the principle of least privilege. Only provide access required by the business scenario. Next is to look for relationships. So ask yourself, is the user related to a contact? Is the user related to an account? Is there a parent to child account relationship? Are the two businesses related? Is there a manager who needs border visibility or dedicated user access? So the relationship here between the user and the record sometimes can tell you very useful information about what sharing mechanism that you can potentially apply. Now that you have identified the relationships, let's take a look at what sharing mechanism is most appropriate for each relationship. Starting with sharing set. So if a scenario says users should access records related to their own account or contact, think about sharing set. A typical scenario would be customers needing access to see cases associated with their own account. Moving on to sharing group. Consider using sharing group where a sharing set provides external users with access, and internal users also need access to records owned by those external users. A typical scenario would be customer users created records, and internal users have to access records created by these users. Let's look at external roles and sharing roles. So consider using external roles and sharing roles when external license supports roles, and there's use cases that requires role-based access. And there are records that are shared based on ownership or defined criteria. A typical scenario would be if a partner manager needs access to records owned by partner users below them in the hierarchy. Next, let's look at external account hierarchy. So consider using this when external accounts have a parent-child structure and users in the parent account need access to records associated with child accounts. Typical scenario would be a customer's head office needs visibility into records belong to its regional companies. Moving into account relationship sharing. So consider using account relationship sharing when you have two separate business accounts that have an established business relationship, and users from one account need access from another account's record. And these cannot be represented through a parent-child account structure because the two companies or companies are not related. Typical scenario would be distributor needs access to selected records that belongs to a retailer, and the distributor and the retailer companies are not related to each other in terms of company structure. Now moving on to super user access. So consider using this when the selected external user needs border access. They must access records owned by other users in the same account. So typical scenario would be partner manager needs access to opportunities and cases belong to other users in the partner account. All right, here is a simplified decision map. It might not cover all the scenarios, but it provides you a good overview of the key sharing mechanisms that's covered in this section of the exam. So if access is based on your user's account or contact, consider using sharing set. If internal users need access to high-value external users, records that are owned by high-value external users, use share group. Does the external user have a role? This is where you can use external role hierarchy and or sharing rules. If parent account needs visibility into child accounts, use external account hierarchy. If users from one business needs access to another business, they are not associated with each other in terms of company hierarchy, use account relationship sharing. And if a selected user needs border access within their own account, use super user access. Alright, common exam traps. Do not confuse object access with record access. So a permission set might grant you access to case object, but it does not automatically give users access to every case record. Do not ignore the external user license. Some of the suitable sharing options might not be available for the license described in the scenario. So make sure you understand what licenses can provide what capabilities and access for the user. Selecting an overlay board solution. So don't select a board sharing mechanisms when things like sharing set or other more targeted options can satisfy the requirement. Don't confuse account relationships. So if there's a parent and child accounts, use external account hierarchy. If the businesses are not related to each other, but they have a defined business relationship, use account relationship sharing. And not all external licenses support roles. High volume user licenses do not support roles, so they can't use sharing roles. Instead, they have to use sharing set, which is account or contact based access. All right, to summarize, to determine the correct experience cloud security model, first identify licenses, define and confirm the required object and field permissions, determine the baseline access via awkward default, identify the relationship between user, account, contact, and record. Select the most targeted sharing mechanism and apply the principle of least privilege. In terms of resources, I've provided all of these from topic 1 to 5, so I won't repeat again here. All right, let's move on to topic number 7, describe roles for external users. So most of the content in this topic has already been covered in topic 3 and 4. In here, we won't go in depth. I'll just be covering some of the key points. All right, as covered earlier in topic 3 and 4, you can configure number of user roles, number of customer roles, and number of partner roles via Experience Cloud settings, number of partner roles, and number of customer roles. If it's set to 3, for partners, you have these 3 roles available. If it's set to 3 for customers, you have these 3 roles available. Some considerations here, which have been covered previously as well in previous topics. In terms of data access, the external role hierarchy is very much the same as internal role hierarchy, where users in higher external roles can be grant access to records owned by users beneath them in the hierarchy. Roles per account maximum is 3 and minimum is 1, which is the default. And Salesforce recommends to use one account role and use other sharing mechanisms to grant visibility. This is especially true for organizations where there are a lot of accounts. Having a lot of partner and customer roles can increase the calculation time for sharing calculations. Supported license types, you'll need Customer Community Plus and Partner Community, as these are the 2 license types that support role-based sharing. Channel Manager, we have covered this before as well. For internal org, there is usually a channel manager, which is an internal user that is usually in charge of managing partner or customer relationships. And this user is typically the account record owner. So all the external account records will roll up to the account owner. One thing to be mindful of is other internal users can potentially edit or view records owned by the channel manager, depending on what sharing mechanisms have been configured. Maximum account roles is 50,000. You can increase it to 500,000 by contacting Salesforce. Customer side roles. So this is the only topic that wasn't covered previously. Custom labels can be created and replace any standard roles. So in this example earlier, we have partner executive, partner manager, partner user, customer executive, customer manager, customer user. You can customize the label here. You can replace partner with something else. Same with customer as well. So to configure this, go to Workspaces, Administration. Actually, go to All Sites, Workspaces, Administration, Members, Site Role Custom. And you can replace these labels and instead of selecting default, select custom. If one or more site roles should not be used, you can leave it empty as well. I've provided a few resources here for setting up account roles and account role hierarchy. Who sees what in communities, account and role hierarchies, and how to set up custom site roles. And that wraps up part 4 of the Experience Cloud Consultant Preparation series. We've covered sharing, visibility, licensing, which are some of the most important concepts you'll encounter. In part 5, the final video of the series, we'll bring everything together by covering user creation and authentication. We'll go over how to create users manually with data loader or using self-registration or just-in-time provisioning. We'll go over how to set up external users correctly. We'll explore different single sign-on options that are available, also how to enable partner and customer users, and granting access to Experience Cloud sites. We'll also go over customization considerations and platform limitations. We'll cover in some of the frequent questions that appear on the exam and some of the constraints that you must design around when you implement Experience Cloud. If you are aiming to pass the certification exam, part 5 is definitely one you don't want to miss. Thanks for watching part 4 of the Experience Cloud Consultant Exam Preparation series. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the final episode. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I would love to help you with your certification journey. Until next time, this is Cloud with Ryan. See you in part 5.